School board test. Good afternoon. The time is now 4 o'clock. The Wayzata Public Schools Board of Education work session for Monday, September 23rd, 2024 will please come to order. Let's go around the table for introductions, starting with my right.
Heidi Cater.
Sheila Pryor.
Dan Ginestra.
Paris Mende.
Valentina Years.
Sarah Johansson.
And Chase Anderson.
And I am Milind Soni. Welcome, everyone. Today we have back-to-back meetings with a small recess between each. First, the work session, which we always have on the fourth Monday. Then we will have a special regular board meeting, and finally, a special closed session for superintendent evaluation. So let's begin. First, we have the superintendent's report. Dr. Anderson will introduce new administrators for the district.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. It's my honor tonight to introduce, I'm only seeing one here so far, but we'll start with Carly Bailey. If she would just come forward and maybe take a seat here in front of the board. I'm going to share a little bit about Carly first and then give her an opportunity to share anything that she might want to. And we've had a tradition to welcome new administrators to the district at a work session or a school board meeting. So Carly is our new assistant principal at West Middle School. And I'll just share a little bit about her background here. She comes to us from Eastern Carver County Schools, where she's worked as a personalized learning coach, sixth grade teacher, special education teacher, and did her internship hours for principalship and maybe other licenses. That's the one I'm aware of, I guess. And then she did her specialist degree at the University of St. Thomas, her master's at St. Mary's University, and her undergrad degree at University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire with a bachelor's degree in special education and elementary education. Carly, welcome.
Thank you.
Not only here today, but to the district. So I'll give you an opportunity to share a little bit about yourself and your first few days, weeks, months here.
Absolutely. First of all, nice to meet you all. And thank you for this opportunity, not only to be here tonight, I was really excited to get this opportunity, but to also get to be a part of the Wayzata Public Schools. I have a little bit of history with the school district. Years back, my dad was the superintendent from 1994 to 2004. And so I've always felt a deep connection to the school district. And he was always so proud of it and the history of it. And so I lived here with them for a little while as well. So really, this would be the only place that I was hoping to be a part of someday in my career. So I've spent my first 25 years, like Chase mentioned, in Eastern Carver County Schools. And this was the place I wanted to be as I moved forward with my career. So I've been beyond appreciative of all of the support that I've been given, not only from Chase reaching out and other district leaders, but Ryan Carlson at West, as well as the staff, has been phenomenal in welcoming me. But also it's been so exciting, the energy of the kids, the energy of the staff as we've started off this new school year. I've been very impressed. The support from the families and the community as well has just all been fabulous. And it's been exciting as we start to work and live out some of our goals of the school year and seeing the students really engage in the new block schedule and in some of the new courses that we've been offering. So it's been a fabulous start and truly appreciate the support that people have reached out with as I've, new in the district. And so it's been outweighed what I ever thought it would be at this point. So I really appreciate it. It's been a fabulous start, and I'm excited to keep growing and learning along with everybody to make things as best as we possibly can for our learners.
Thank you, Carly. I appreciate that you came over here today and fought the traffic, north-south bound.
Yes, there's a little
and east and westbound. Now that I think about it, it's not real great right now.
Yes. It explains some of the changes of the routes and so forth. So that's good. Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. Nice to meet everybody. Thank you.
And I think maybe I'll just share a little bit about our other administrator. My guess is if she took the same route I did from the district office pretty much could guess where she's at right now, but somewhere on Vicksburg perhaps. But anyway, I'll just share a little bit. If Cassie shows up, we'll give her a chance to make a few comments too here between presentations. But Cassie Van Coverden is our new associate principal at Sunset Hill Elementary School, and she's had quite a lot of experience actually right within the district. She's worked with our MTSS program as its coordinator. She was the dean of students at Sunset Hill Elementary, school assessment coordinator at Sunset, PBIS restitution facilitator at Sunset Hill. She served as an AWE course instructor in our QComp program. She participated in the West Metro Leadership Academy. She's been a special education team leader and a teacher in special education at Oakwood and Gleason Lake. She did her bachelor degree at the University of Minnesota Duluth in elementary ed, social studies, and special ed. EBD certificate from St. Cloud State, Masters of Education at the University of Minnesota in Twin Cities, and SLD, or Special Education Learning Disabilities, and she did her K-12 principal license at St. Cloud State University. So Cassie comes in, we'll give her a little background, but or an opportunity to share a little bit if we can work that out. But just know that we're happy to have her in that role, and she served the district well in so many different capacities. So with that, I'll hand it back over to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson, and welcome Carly and Cassie. We hope you get all the support you need and deserve in the district. So welcome to Wayzata. Colleagues, any questions, comments? All right. Hearing none, we will move on to the next item, which is a presentation on the Well-Being Advisor Program entering its 5th year by Executive Director of Human Resources, Stacy Voss. Stacy?
Thank you, and good afternoon, Chair Salhoni and members of the board. I'm very excited to introduce to you today 3 extremely instrumental people in our district helping us support all staff to be healthy and happy employees. First, walking towards you is Christina Busko, and in the middle there is Katie Schultz, and then we have Joanne Fieldseth. Katie and Christina have been the district's well-being advisors for over the past 5 years. This program started as a collaboration between Wayzata Public Schools and Fairview Health Services. And it has morphed into a 0.5 position to now 2 full-time positions. This is a very unique offering that we have for our employees because we are providing mental health services without the wait. If you know anything about finding counseling support services out in the community, there is a wait, and it's very difficult to find people to address concerns that are coming up, especially the stress that we hear a lot about with our employees and just the overall health crisis that we're experiencing in our country. And we really wanted to make sure that we had services to provide to all of our staff to support their well-being in our district. Joanne is an instrumental part of this, as you know. She's the one who loves health insurance, which we're super happy about. And she helps us monitor, we're self-insured. And so we have a general fund basically for our self-insured dollars that we need to spend on health insurance, dental insurance, and we utilize that money to pay for our internal well-being advisors, as that then actually saves our health insurance fund money because we're not spending more money on finding service providers outside of who we have in our district. So I'm going to stop talking because these lovely people in front of you have a wonderful presentation, are much more interesting than I am, and have lots of fun things to share with you. So go ahead.
Thank you, Stacy, and thank you, school board members and Superintendent Anderson, for having us here today. I'm going to highlight, we'll probably go over just a few things that Stacy said and provide just a little bit more history of where we came from. We actually have had a wellness program for our employees, and that's the area under the human resources umbrella, under benefits, the well-being pieces, employee wellness is under our watch, I guess to say. So what we have always had in the district is an employee assistance program, an EAP, and you've probably heard of those. A lot of companies, a lot of businesses have had those, and we've always had a traditional EAP, which means a 24-hour, you can call the number, you can speak to somebody, possibly get referred, maybe have 3 to potentially 5 visits for that call, and then that's what we always had. But in all the years that I've been a part of EAP and part of human resources in 30-something years, it's always been a very low return on investment. You could say probably 2 to 5%. With the pandemic, it went up to almost 7 to 9%, which still isn't that great. So back in April of 2020, while the pandemic really was just coming on, we had on our renewal to start looking for a more robust EAP. Like, what else could we do? This isn't working. We had to renew. So we really did a big search to try to find something that was more of an enhanced EAP. And we came across mHealth Fairview at that time, who had an offering to set that program up so that we could have your traditional call-in 24 hours, 365 days a year, set up for them, and hit or miss of when you could get them or when you could get appointments. But they also offered a dedicated employee from the mHealth Fairview staff that was a licensed senior advisor for mental health therapy, and that became part of our plan. So we set that up with them in September of 2020, which was fabulous. It was started going, we started building, our numbers went up, and then they decided, mHealth Fairview, to discontinue that program. At that time, Katie was the employee that was there. So we were fortunate enough to steal Katie over to our side, so to speak, and she became a consultant to us. She's not our employee, and neither is Christina. They both are on a consultant basis with us. So that's when we switched over, started in January of what year? November 20? With that quick? November 20, you came on in January.
Yes.
Yeah, we switched over and added Katie to us and kept the same confidential services, but were able to start offering our employees a dedicated well-being advisor, and they'll explain how they do their services in detail as well. But it was for just our employees to be able to call, set up virtual appointments, which during the pandemic was huge, to go over everything from stress and anxiety to family things to addiction, all kinds of things. So this was a wonderful service that was set up. We also were able to still go with one of our life insurance policies that had a free EAP. And again, that's not anywhere near as robust as this, but it's still there, and it was no cost, where we were paying for an EAP in the past as well. Just it was about $2.50 per member per month. So that was the cost back then. So we have added them as consultants. We have website resources. We have videos on demand. All those things are still growing, and from November 22 is when we switched, sorry. So we were with mHealth Fairview from 20 to 2022. November 22, we added Katie. January 23, we added Christina. And again, the numbers and reflections, I'll come back to a little later at the end if you have specific questions, but I'm gonna have Katie and Christina just kind of explain how the program works from their side.
All right, so I am Katie Schultz. My background is I am dual licensed. I'm a licensed addiction counselor, and I'm a licensed independent clinical social worker. I worked over a decade at Hazelden Betty Ford, specifically with adolescents at the Plymouth site. And then from there, I actually started my own private practice. So I work, was it 9 years?
Almost 9 years.
Almost 9 years that I've been in private practice. And I think that's about it. Yeah.
I'm Christina Busco. I'm a licensed professional clinical counselor. My background is heavily advocacy-based, so I have a lot of experience working with systems and program development. Clinically, my background is very trauma-heavy. I've worked at lots of advocacy organizations in the Twin Cities over the years, over the last, it's been 10 years this year. Katie and I have been in private practice together for the last 8 years, which is how we were connected when she was looking to have somebody join her to help her support this program. Go for it.
No, this is yours. This is your slide.
Recently, we've been doing a lot of, we've been adding some additional things to our program on top of just providing mental health services. So some of the stats that are on this slide about why this program is important comes from a couple of the resources that we've been utilizing. So both Katie and I have brought our resources today, both the Beyond Self-Care and Educator Wellness. These are both resources that we've pulled from heavily over the last 2 years as we've developed programming, as we've geared the work that we've been doing towards teachers, educators, leaders, principals, admin. And so as you can see, there's lots of support behind creating some robust well-being programs within the school system. These are Canadian numbers. I know we had a question, I think from Heidi, about the research. And so we went back and took a look. There is some US research. A lot of it is anecdotal. A lot of it is, this is what we know about well-being, how it impacts people. There hasn't been as many US studies as there have been. It's Education Canada Network, I think is what the full name of it is. They have a dedicated program that implements wellness programs and then does research based on that implementation. So that's where a lot of these numbers have come from. Anything you want to add?
No.
I'll add.
Yeah, please.
So actually, the one of the most recent studies, which isn't, I guess it's on the cutting edge, is what I'd say. There, again, like she said, there aren't a lot, but in November of 23, I'm going to read this because it's a long statement, but there was a report called Leveraging the Evidence on the Relationship Between Teacher and Student Wellbeing in Learning and Teaching that was published. And this was encompassed 67 studies, and 34% were conducted in the United States. And the highlights of it were 93% of the studies found a positive relationship between teacher well-being and student well-being, and 84% of the studies showed a positive relationship between teacher well-being and student learning and achievement. So basically, the higher level of well-being, you're more likely to use innovative technology and things to teach. Now, this to me goes back to, again, however long ago I started, really just the basis of my belief in this program is a happy employee makes a more productive employee. I think you'll find that anywhere in human resources study, you can find a million studies about that. The happier you are, the harder you work, the more productive you are. I think it's just common. And then the happier you are as an employee, the happier your customers are, or in our case, our students, families, our coworkers, everyone. So I think that all is so connected together that while there are all kinds of studies that can show that, I think it's just kind of a common sense knowledge that, if you feel good, you do work a lot better. So
Yeah. There was another one that we did research on too, where there's a PEW Research Center out of Washington, D.C., and they did a study too. And some of the stats that I quickly grabbed is one of them was 54% of teachers rated that they're very or somewhat difficult to balance work-life balance. And that is one of the areas specifically that we do a lot of support on in the wellbeing program is how to balance work and life, being a teacher, being a parent, being a spouse, significant other. The other one that I found really interesting on there is that 68% of teachers feel that their job since COVID is overwhelming.
If this is something that you're interested in learning more about, the research that's been done, there are a lot of lit reviews that have been done about the research over the last probably 2 decades. The National Library of Medicine, their subsection of Frontiers of Psychology in 2023 did a pretty large-scale lit review that covered research both in the US, Canada, Israel, a bunch in the UK, Australia. And so if that is something you're interested in, there's definitely research outside of the US too to continue to look at.
All right, so now the actual part about the program. So the wellbeing program is something that Christina and I are obviously very passionate about. So here's a few little things about it. First of all, it's very flexible for all staff. So the way that the program is currently set up is that staff reach out or connect with Christina and I, and from there we are able to start getting them scheduled. Right now it's taking about 2 weeks, that's it, for them to get onto our schedule. If you were to look at finding a private clinician outside of the program, it can take anywhere from 2 months to,
6 months.
6 months.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody was to reach out to some of our colleagues, some of them aren't taking new clients. So the fact that if a staff member needs something, and depending on their flexibility, sometimes we can even get them in sooner. The flexibility is also how we meet with them. So traditional therapy is on the hour. So it's 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. We have gotten really good. If you look at our schedule, it's 11:11 to 11:47. The next schedule might be at 1:06 to like 1:25. So our therapy sessions are actually based around when staff have availability during the day. So if it's during their prep hour, if it's during their lunch hour, sometimes we are having them meet us right after school before they leave to their kids' soccer game. So our schedule is very flexible to try to be an enhancement to their life. Let's see what else is important on here. The coaching opportunities. So besides offering individual therapy, which we offer either by HIPAA compliant Zoom or by phone call, we also do a lot of training. So we go into the schools and we offer specific training if the school asks for it. So last year we did different series on understanding the stress cycle, window of tolerance. This year, we'll talk about a little bit later, we've actually made a progression of trainings that we're pretty excited about going into the schools. So we're going into the schools and offering trainings either individually by what the principal is requesting, or we've actually even went in and done even smaller cohorts. So if there's a first grade team that needed some additional support, we'll go in and meet with them to do that. Is there anything else that I...
Yeah, so some of the differences between the way that we provide services versus like a basic EAP program. So if you've ever utilized an EAP program, typically it's a set number of sessions that you are allowed to use, anywhere from like 3 to 10, depending on the insurance carrier. And then after that set number of sessions, you are then referred out to somebody else, or you can start using your insurance to bill. We don't have any time limits on the length that folks are able to access our services. So we have some folks who will come and see us once to talk through a specific situation or access some skills, or we have folks that we have seen for years. We have folks who will come and go throughout the year as stressors change and the school year ebbs and flows. So we have a lot of flexibility in the length of time and the relationship that we get to develop with the folks that are using our services. The other beauty of our program is that we don't bill insurance. And so what's beautiful about that is that we don't have to operate within a pathologizing model, which is required of us when we're billing through insurance. So if I'm meeting with somebody, I have to find a diagnosable code in order to bill insurance to have it reimbursed. If you don't meet threshold or criteria for a diagnosable disorder, you have to pay cash. I can't bill insurance if I can't substantiate the symptoms you're bringing to me. And so the beauty of a program like this is we don't have to pathologize what people are bringing in. They get to just come in and access services and get support. I had somebody come in for an intake a couple weeks ago, and they came in and like, I'm doing great, but I want to come in and I want to check in like once a month to make sure I'm consistently staying in that place as I move through the school year. And so we get to catch people before it's reactive, before their symptoms are starting to impact the way that they're showing up at school, as well as helping folks who are kind of past that threshold as well. Anything else?
No, that was great. So our program is growing. So this is the exciting piece. So the first year was our dear friend Heidi, who actually was the bridge between Fairview and us. And the first year we had 4 meetings and trainings that entire school year. So 4 meetings that we went into and did trainings. And on average, between Heidi and I, we were seeing 24 people the whole month. Now we are going into every single school at least once. This year, our goal is to go into every single school 3 times. And at the end of last year, we were averaging 113 sessions a month. So our numbers are consistently increasing, and people are seeing the program. When they know the program, they're coming back to us. So when we get to go in and do those trainings and they get to meet with us, the numbers of intakes continue to go up when they get to see us and get to know us.
Yeah, statistically what we've seen is that the schools that we have physically been in front of and done trainings with have been the ones that have reached out for services. So Katie and I can see, even on our calendars, the folks that have that know who we are, that know that we exist because they're utilizing the program.
Yeah. Do you want me to go first?
Go for it.
So the service we're offering today, obviously mental health therapy. So we offer therapy for staff that work with Wyzetta, as well as ages 16 and up that are in the household currently. And so we are able to offer services to spouses or to older children who are also needing services. They're able to utilize this. And with our background and kind of our ability, we have a lot of services we can offer. As Christina said, she is trained in trauma. I have a background in trauma. I also specialize in DBT. We both are trained in EMDR. I have a huge background in addiction. So the benefit with us, we have a vast knowledge between the two of us, which opens up a lot of doors for people to receive services that way.
This year, we're trying to roll out some additional services on top of individual mental health. We, this year, have developed a 3-part training series that we're starting to roll out for our first portion of the school year. And the goal is for it to be a progressive training series that moves through the school year. What we found in the last couple of years is that there are different needs that staff are having throughout the school year depending on the time of year. So the beginning of the year, that transition to the start of the year, that middle of year, if any of you ever feel that in like January, February after the holidays, our teachers feel that too. And then wrapping up to the end of the school year, how do we make that kind of last final push? And so our goal has been to develop a training series that reflects those needs that we've heard over the last couple of years.
We're also going to be piloting a group support starting in October. So one of the other things that have come up in the last few years, what we have noticed is that teachers feel very siloed or very alone about certain issues. However, they're not. There's very common themes, there's very common threads. And so this year we are going to pilot titling a few different options for group support and offering that through Zoom so that teachers from all over the district, if they would like to, can join to offer that support to one another.
We also rolled out a new website this year, which is new, just so that folks have a landing page to go. They can learn a little bit more about who we are, what we do. There's resources that exist on there. There's information about the trainings that we've been doing. There's handouts. That's where we will put our schedule for our rotating groups throughout the school year so that people have more of access to what it is that we do and how we can support them. Did you want to add anything, Joanne?
We could do a college course on this, actually, probably, or a degree if we wanted to put everything into this program. But I think this is one of the programs that I consider one of my favorites of all of our things in our wellness programs and our benefit programs, because I think it really addresses our staff. And I'm really big on saying not just teachers, it's also for our paraprofessionals, our custodians, our food service, our admin staff, our administrators, it's for everyone. And so all staff have suffered, I think, in all positions and jobs and careers in the world. It's been tough. We've had a lot of things that have changed. So I think it's really important that we start recognizing mental health as the same as a broken leg. You know, if somebody has that, oh, you have a broken leg, you can't walk. Well, if you're having a mental concern of any kind of stress, we also need to think about that and recognize it as normal. You know, it's something that happens. We need to talk about it. We need to make it not a taboo anymore. So I'm a big believer. While Stacy said I love benefits, I don't know if love's the right word. I'm passionate about, you know, making sure people are taken care of, again, because the staff are my customers, where like a teacher, the students really are like theirs. But I view the staff as really our customers and who we want to take care of and to grow and develop from there. And I do think it has been well received. I don't get, if there's a complaint about something, I usually hear it. And I don't always hear the good things, but this is one program that I've actually heard good things from, and I'm like, don't tell me too much because it is private information. So I don't want them to tell me, but they'll sometimes go on and on. But I think that's a huge plus for us. I do have a slide, and I think if I do this right, I'm going to show you just my little cost, because I know this was a question that was asked. So we'll see if I can get this to work. Oh, look at that. Great. So if you look at this slide that's there, this is my rough rounding of numbers of just a cost analysis of what we would spend, because again, we're self-insured. So anytime you go to the doctor or doctor's office, we pay that as a district. So if you look at the office visits and the number of people using the program and the average office visit, and that's on the low end, just being treated for an intake, basically, that's the cost it would be. If we look at meetings and trainings, again, a low number, but if all the trainings that they're doing and meetings that they're set up for, consults and mediations, which they also can do with maybe a group is, experiencing some issues they want to talk about, and then staffing and substitutes. I put an asterisk by that. It's highlighted in yellow because I view this as priceless. The amount of time that it takes to find a sub, to have someone come in, to do their lesson plans, where if we can keep people in their jobs and they're just using their break time to schedule, I can't put a price on it. It is priceless to me. And if that's only based on a half day, if someone were to leave, if someone leaves for an appointment for a whole day, we double that amount. So you're looking at our total there, the cost of the consultants, the two of them and their secure data, the site that they use, their costs and our overall savings. And again, I truly believe this is on the low end, but it's around $329,000. So do I think this is worth it? Absolutely. Because it keeps people in school and hopefully will continue to grow and thrive. And I think that's it, but we're more than willing to answer questions.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Stacy. Thank you, Christina, Katie, and Joanne. Thank you so much for the presentation. Anyone have any questions or comments?
Thank you for that presentation. It sounds like it's a win-win for, our budget, our staff, and then ultimately our students. So, and if I'm not mistaken, other districts in the area are looking to Wayzata because this program has been so successful that they're wanting to copy us. And I guess thank you for your leadership in this area because it is, it does sound like it's really been beneficial. And so thank you. I did have one question about, you mentioned the return on investment. And I know it's not just budgetary savings, but is it also the number of teachers that are able to make use of the services? Is that what you mean by return on investment?
Actual context of any staff, that are actually using it versus like what we get in our past from just a traditional EAP. Like we were paying that $2.50 per employee per month for that service and only having a 2% usage. Where now we are paying more, but the usage is amazing and it's saving us all those other costs that I kind of broke down as well.
That's what I thought you meant. I just wanted clarification.
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
And you're right about the other. Katie and I have been asked to go to several presentations. We were even asked to go to one that they wanted us to run their program. We're like, we don't have time for that, sorry. But, and I know it's a struggle. We were super fortunate. Part of this program and being successful is luck because we were able to get Katie, who stayed and was with us. It's finding the right person too that also values education, that really wants to be in that and understand what our staff are going through. We were fortunate. So other places really have to find the right people to fill in those roles. And again, part of that's luck.
Question I'll have is what kind of common themes do you have at the beginning of the year, in the middle of the year, and at the end of the year?
Yeah.
I'm curious. Thank you.
So the beginning of the year is a lot of, well, we actually just, in my training I did last week with Christina, we talked about the well-being question. So like, how do you feel on Sunday night? Like what emotions do you get Sunday night, thinking of your calendar, looking ahead? And so the theme for the beginning of the year is a lot of fear and anxiety. It's a transition of coming back into school and wondering what tools we have. So the beginning of the year, it's a lot of focusing on a personal plan and developing of the overall well-being to help them understand what resources they have and what support they have moving forward. In that, after the holiday season that Christina was talking about, the big word that comes up a lot is burnout. Mm-hmm. So by the time we get into January, February, the days are longer in regards to like the days are short, the nights are long. So it's dark, it's cold, and we're kind of getting to that place of where there's seasonal affect too. And so that burnout is really high. So our goal for that progressive training is we're going to focus on burnout and connecting people back to their why to support them to move forward. And then at the end of the year, we're going to be working and focusing on transition. It's a lot of exhaustion by the end of the year, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. So how can we continue to kind of I don't know if you ever hear from folks about like senior year slide, right? Like lots of folks feel that at the end of the year of like, how do I get through that last month? How do I get through that last couple of weeks? And it is really just sustainability at the end of the school year. How do we keep going strong through the end and then set ourselves up for success once we transition into the summer so we can try and kind of get some of those energy stores back up to start the school year again in September.
We do keep information though, so we understand themes. So besides those themes of school, there are other themes that we focus on too. If it's anxiety, depression, family, personal relationships, addiction, grief and loss, trauma. Let's see, is there any other ones I'm
It's been a lot of parenting as
Lot
a
of
teacher
parenting.
lately, like how to balance being a parent and a teacher after you've given so much throughout the day.
Yeah.
That's been pretty heavy this last couple of months as the school year's.
I'd say in the last
coming up.
year too is a lot of grief,
Mhm.
a lot of grief and loss.
Yep.
And I think it's important to note too, because I don't think we said this enough, that one of the other reasons I think that other EAPs are getting our employees to participate is confidentiality. We don't, in our office, in the HR department, we don't find out who they're seeing or why they're being seen. So we really have to emphasize that because that fear of talking to somebody and somebody finding out is huge. So that's why a lot of people are hesitant. And I think our numbers continue to grow because the word's getting out that this is happening and we don't talk about it. The only things that we're going to find out is if there's a whole entire building at an elementary school and they're all having the same issue and they're all calling, that's when Katie would shoot off and say, hey, guys, there might be something going on at this elementary. So that's the kind of stuff again, but again, nobody's personal information is ever shared. And we really emphasize that because we want them to feel like they're in a secure and safe environment to speak.
Great. You answered one of my questions because I wanted to understand if there are any trends that you see that you share with school administration to say, hey, this is something we are seeing now on an increased basis. And so that answers my question. The other question I had was, based on your professional experience, is this typical, you would call it, within Wayzata School District, or are you finding instances where now you have to refer them to external help? Or is it very typical, the volume, the trend, all of that looks either seasonal, very typical for this profession? Any concern, any sort of concerning trend, or?
I would say it's pretty typical across the board, both from what we would see in our private practice, just moving through a typical year in Minnesota, but also following the progression of the school year, and specifically teachers who have a summer break, and what that looks like as they move through the 9 months. I wouldn't say Wayzata is out of the ordinary in terms of the challenges that they're experiencing in being a teacher in today's school system. And I would say it follows outside of the school system to a lot of the themes and needs that Katie and I see in private practice as well.
Okay, thank you.
Would you agree with that? Yeah.
Well, thank you for answering all of my questions. You addressed everything that I had questions.
That was the
goal. I just wanted to say thank you because I think one of the huge value adds that I learned about, thank you for educating me on it, is that we're addressing issues before the need gets too big. And I have a public health background, and I can't tell you how much that it really touched me because I know how incredibly important that is, that you get ahead of it before the need is there, and not having to have that diagnostic framework is huge. So I really appreciate that. And I think that's a huge asset to our district for our teachers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again. I think a healthy teacher that's very, very happy does not only help the kids, the teacher helps the family, to help the friends, the community. Everybody wants a happy person around them, right? So that I think is a lot of good stuff. I have two questions. Stacy mentioned that the teachers can call any time of the day. So what happens if a teacher wakes up at midnight with a panic attack and calls the number that they have? What do you do?
Well, we would recommend, like, again, they primarily, their number is really for weekdays set hours, like they're going, with answer or a voicemail. But we do still have our health insurance that they can be covered under for those emergency situations, but they should call them first. And we do have our traditional EAP if it isn't life-threatening. So we still educate that, like in our flyer, we say if an emergency or, suicide prevention, all those kind of things, those are still out there as well. And we would encourage people, if it's that type of situation, to go to our insurance or their insurance for something, an emergency need at a really odd hour.
Okay, so this is not a total replacement for EAP or insurance then?
Correct, not complete replacement,
Okay,
just a
thank
more
you.
personalized.
You mentioned that in the first year, there were 24 sessions per month, and now after 4 years, it's like 113. I don't know if I'm wrong about this, but most of that might have been the effect of the after effects of the pandemic. A lot of it. Now, do you see a trend of that still going up? Do you see that going down eventually? What's your idea on that?
That's a good question. I think there's, if we look at our numbers, they do trend based on the school year. So our numbers kind of continue to go up throughout the school year. And then the first month of summer, our numbers drop. And then starting in August, our numbers start going up again. I don't think that the trend is based on the pandemic. I think that the first year I was on, I actually thought the numbers would have been the largest in the pandemic. But I think our numbers are continuing to increase because we're continuing to be out in the public for Wayzata and letting them get to know us and understand the program. The more we get out there, the information about the program, the more people are using it. And I would say a lot of our intakes are actually coming from word of mouth. It's like, hey, have you talked to Katie and Christina? Like, I talked to them, it seemed like it really helped. And then pretty soon we'll have somebody call and say, like, I was told to call you. So I think our numbers are increasing because of those connections we're making.
Okay, thank you so much. If there are no more questions, thank you again for your presentation, and it was very, very enlightening, though, all of us. Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, moving on to the next item. Teaching and Learning Executive Director Dana Miller will give the World's Best Workforce report on kindergarten readiness and literacy. And I believe she has help from Dr. Lackner.
Members of the board, Dr. Anderson, thanks for having us tonight. As Director Sahoni said, we are here tonight to focus on a portion of the World's Best Workforce report. And as some of you are aware, each year it's a requirement for us of the state to present to the board the World's Best Workforce report. But based on some feedback, and I just think in our fourth year together doing this, continuing to try to get better and make this information that can be really dense more useful to you as a board and more informative, we're kind of changing things up a little bit and been working with our committee of the board to break this World's Best Workforce report into kind of 3 chunks. And so tonight we will be doing half of the World's Best Workforce. In October, we will do another half. And then in November, we will join Director Haraday in the Achievement and Integration. But we wanted to start out tonight, you'll notice this fine young gentleman here in the picture to really center our work as we're looking at goals and data. It's important for us to remember that in education, how we measure how we're doing is different than if we were running a widget business or something to that effect. It's really hard to just increase productivity because we make a change in something. And so really our work is human work. It's about students, it's about learners. And so it's always just a really good reflection to come back and keep that really in our mind as we go through some of this work, and that the importance of both qualitative and quantitative data, or for those that you've been with us and read the street level data, the importance of that satellite map and street, because it takes all of that to tell us a story about the product that we're responsible for, and that's our children and our future. So just really wanting to keep that in focus tonight. So as we think about our goals and our purpose and why we're here, we want to really tonight create a shared understanding, and we are going to start with maybe doing a little bit of reflective work on what is that district through line. And when Dr. Flansburgh was here, he would often talk about a through line and talk about it in the forms of people, from board to the superintendent to leaders to teachers to students. And we've really taken to that a little bit deeper approach to that tonight, and are going to talk about what that through line looks like in our system and the systems work that we do. And that it starts with very important strategic directions and equity commitment that you all set that really becomes kind of that beacon that drives our work throughout the system. We're going to take a look at that world's best workforce and the achievement and integration legislation and how it relates to the collective work that we all do together. We'll talk about kindergarten readiness, and now that is actually school readiness and part of systems work, or something known as the successful learner equation. We're going to come to a shared understanding, hopefully, of FastBridge as a reading screener and how that provides us a source of information about student learning, and I would argue student growth being more important there. And then the results from our current screeners, and that those provide, again, one data point on how our students are doing and how our demographics are performing specific to reading in grades K through 8. So this is the draft, and I'm going to emphasize draft. I met with Amy today in the communications department, and I just want to own this is not her work because it would look amazingly better. This is our first draft thinking on that, and we are going to spend some time together and make it better once we get some of your feedback and SLT's feedback as well. But in a draft, we were looking for something that we could use as a visualization of that through line and to really see how all the work connects, and that it starts with all of you at the table, telling those of us that implement what are the directions and what is the focus that you want us to have? What are the outcomes as a board that you want for the Wayzata public school system? And you put those forth every 3 years in those strategic directions and in that equity commitment. And as I said before, that really becomes then that guiding document that we use then for all of our work. If I was to go back, as we talked about this model, we just continue to talk about this visual, I would have put the student achievement and student engagement at the front as well, because again, keeping that student centered. So the next draft, you will see, will also have that student achievement, student engagement. So we start with that and we end with that, because those are really our anchors, and then the work, the great work that you all do to guide that. So I'm struggling to remember to click for me. So tonight then, while all those strategic directions, as you know, you've written 7 of those to guide tied together. So it's really hard to pull them apart because you can't do one without doing the others. But for tonight's work, we're really more strongly focused on strategic direction 1 and 2 from the roadmap. And so that's the daily student experience. That is our high quality instruction that therefore leads to high quality achievement. So as we talk about the through line of the work, those are the 2 things that we'll be focusing on. So then from that strategic roadmap that you give to us, the next thing that's really developed through that is the work that Dr. Anderson directs with district leadership, whether it's at the district level, at the building level, and all of us come together to create that district operational plan. So really that's that roadmap to say, now that we have the board's directives, how do we bring that to life? And how do we tie in some of those requirements from the state? How does that all fit together so that we can have that high student achievement and high daily experience? So things like the world's best workforce, the achievement and integration work, Minnesota's MTSS system that we're requiring to do, our literacy plan, all those are examples of things that go into that DOP in order to reach those strategic directions. And then we lay out like the task and so forth in those. So here is just an example of some of those that have been started for this year. And again, you will be seeing that district operational plan at another time as well, as Dr. Anderson brings that forward. But here are two of our MTSS goals this year. There are 5 components to the MTSS state systems plan, and we are focusing on 3 areas this year. And so just as an example, and kind of giving you an idea of how this is also set up. So the MTSS leadership team creates that multi-layered practices and support goals, and we'll talk about how those go into the site plan. So there you'll see the district will lead the work in adjusting and aligning high-functioning PLCs. So it tells you that our work is in PLCs to support universal and effective Tier 1 instructional practices and align our curriculum to that. So then you will see the work of teaching and learning. So if we were to break this down to you, we have action steps, who's responsible, our resources, timeline, checkpoints, and that's a lot of in the weeds work for us to be doing, but it kind of gives you an idea of things that would be in the DOP. And then another one around infrastructure for continuous improvement. So just an example of how from your work that translates into the DOP. And then next on that is our site growth plans and our district department plans. So we take that DOP direction, and then our buildings and our departments, so such as teaching and learning, then make our own plans for that work. All right, so again, we're coming back from your direction to the district work, and now we're really bringing that work down to the building level with our building leaders. And you've heard us talk about in the last couple of years those building instructional leadership teams. This is where they really start to get into that work. So every year in August, for the last couple of years anyway, we come together at what we call the Leadership Institute, which is 2 to 3 in August with district leadership and along with every building leadership team, and we look at that data from those different areas outlined in the DOP, and we make new growth plans according to that. So here are some examples from 3 different building site growth plans. So the state QComp goal, for example, is one that we have to report to the state. And every building has to have one, and they are around academic achievement, and they must include all students. So I've taken names off of them for our elementaries, but you'll see a % of all students in grades K-5 at this elementary whose fall to spring growth is in the typical growth or aggressive growth, and Stacy's going to be talking about all that terminology with you. They'll range from, and they're going to look to increase that from 58.3 this last spring to 61.3 this spring. So it's a very solid metric in that building to know how they're doing with all of their students. Then from there, each building is required to have an academic goal and then a student experience goal. And they may have a third one if they choose, which can be another academic one, or they, based on some of our work this year, could do a culture and climate goal as well, based on some recent data we've been collecting from Educators Thriving. That can be another one of their goals. So just wanted to share with you, I'd point out, like in that last one, you'll notice that you'll see 100%. So when we start talking to our students who need to make that high risk or some risk, we're really wanting to say, again, to support the direction you've given us, each and every, that 100% of our students should get to that point to support that goal. And then that brings us from the kind of district level, and you're inching that way in the site plans with builds because there are teachers on that, to the building level. So they take that built or that site growth document and they bring that to our professional learning communities, or you'll hear us call those PLCs. And that's really where the work gets into the teacher level in the classroom and at that grade level. And so this is another example of how this plays out. All of our PLCs create then from that site growth plan their own PLC goal. So this is an example of a kindergarten one from one of our buildings. So this kindergarten team, through instruction of learning letter names curriculum, small reading groups, and para support, we're committing to 100% of kindergarten students being able to verbally produce all 26 letter sounds by the end of last school year so that they would have functional literacy skills. So that's considered a foundational skill so that all of our students can be reading at grade level, which is one of our world's best workforce goals, which is your each and every direction you've set for us. And then this will take through how they plan to do it, how they will work for students who aren't there yet and maybe struggling with that goal, how they'll look for students to extend it, and then you'll see their winter and spring data. It's these reports then when teams of us like Dr. Anderson or myself, and some of us go out to those built visits that you've heard about in the winter and spring. This is what they're reporting out. So it's our way of checking in on how we are progressing with those site growth plans and how that's feeding to the DOP, so we know how we're doing at meeting the goals that you've established for us. So it's those frequent checkpoints at that level. And then from there, from those PLCs, we get to our staff SMART goals. So every teacher must establish a SMART goal, and that's part of our QComp program as well. And they do that with the support of our peer coaches, our literacy coaches. This is part of our TDE, or Teacher Development and Evaluation Program. And it's also supported through our job-embedded professional learning. And so this is just kind of an example of the process that we've shared with teachers. And again, just to help you understand the through line of how your work gets to that teacher level work and is so important. And so you have that building site goal that we talked about, the PLC goal, and then our teachers can choose from having their personal individual goal be the same as the PLC goal. They can create one that aligns to how they're gonna, some work they may want to do around that, or they can create one that is specifically personalized to theirs. So for example, in that last PLC kindergarten goal, you notice that one of their learning targets was to implement their OG strategies, or Orton-Gillingham, to make sure that 100% of their students got to that letter sounds. So I, as a teacher, could set a goal to say, I want to try one Orton-Gillingham strategy every month. And I might have my peer coach come in and watch for that and see how I'm doing that. Or I might invite Julie Schneider and Fehrenbach from Teaching and Learning to come over and co-teach that with me, so I got that improvement. That's the through line on how that completely gets through that work. And so as we start to report out tonight on how we're doing, this is the report on all those different level of work and how it gets back to you in that through line. And so lastly, then, that takes us to what we're here for tonight, and that is to report on how did all of that come together in these areas last year to see how we are doing on meeting your mission that you've established for us as a district to meet each and every student. And so tonight, as I said, we're here for the World's Best Workforce Report. And just as a reminder of what this is, it's the report that is part of Minnesota state legislation to ensure that school districts enhance our student achievement through teaching and learning supports. And then in November we'll be here, but they're also very tightly aligned. So some of the data we'll be reporting on tonight is also data from the ANI. And this is our statute and requirement to pursue racial and economic integration, increase student academic achievement, create equitable educational opportunities, and reduce academic disparities. And as a reminder, this is a requirement based on our racial I'm losing my words right now, sparsity that we have in alignment with Orono schools that we partner with as well. So this is a requirement for us to do, and then we have to report those by December 15th. So tonight, the 23-24 goals, Stacy is going to talk about a change coming, but for this last year, so what we are reporting on tonight is last year's work, and these are the 4 areas. And so all children ready for school, changing to that successful learner equation, all racial and economic achievement gaps between our students are closed, all students are ready for career and college, and all students graduate from high school. And we're going to be reporting on those first 2 tonight.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about the legislative changes that we have had in the last 2 years, which impacts how we report on our student outcomes. So if you remember, back in 2023, there was the new law, Reading to Ensure Academic Development, otherwise known as the READ Act. And in that new law, there were some changes into how we measure our student goals and how we report them in the public. So previously, the World's Best Workforce included a goal on all students reading by 3rd grade. That was removed from the statute in 2023, and it was replaced by the READ Act goal of all students reading at grade level at every grade. So now that's part of the READ Act report. And we also have our 24, 25 district literacy plan, and that is on our school district website, and that has our 23-24 literacy results and our new goal for the 24-25 school year. So those results are in that plan, and also they will be reported this evening as part of our literacy report. Then in 2024, this past season, World's Best Workforce was changed to a new name. It's now the Comprehensive Achievement and Civic Readiness Statute. And so with that, there are new requirements. So when we develop our 24-25 operational plan, we need to make sure that we're reporting on those new requirements. And one of the things just to note is that there is a new goal area around students being lifelong learners. So we'll be putting that together into our new plan for our 24-25 goals. So as Dana had mentioned, we will be reporting 3 times this fall all of our student outcomes. Because there's so much information, we wanted to respond to the board's request to have multiple presentations so that you could get the information in detail and also have an opportunity to ask questions. So the first part of tonight's report is kindergarten readiness. And from the World's Best Workforce plan that was in place in 23-24, the goal was that all students are ready for school. So as you know, with the governor's Due North plan, they've shifted from all students ready for school to the successful learner equation, which talks about the systems being ready for students, and indicating that the student success rests with the adults working together to create the conditions for students to be successful in school, focusing on relationships, resources, and the whole child. So with that, our early learning school has been working hard to make connections between early learning and kindergarten. So they launched their Connect at 3 initiative in the past school year, and this next year they're going to be continuing that initiative and working on getting families to sign up for early childhood screening. They're also, last year, were working to increase their outreach to community partners. So they had a co-teacher that worked with 10 community preschools, and this year that teacher will continue to work with those preschools and also add additional partners. They've also worked to align their professional development between preschool and kindergarten. So they started microaggressions training last year, and then this year they'll be starting LETTERS training with all of the staff, the teachers in the early learning school. LETTERS was chosen because it has a specific preschool component to it. They're also going to be completing or finishing up their microaggressions training with the rest of their staff. They're continuing to collaborate with IOCP. They had regular meetings with them last year, and they'll continue those this year. They're also continuing the TS Gold Assessment, which is a standardized observational tool for 3 to 5-year-olds that are all served by the early learning school. They're continuing to implement that assessment, and in the 24-25 school year, they have goals set around students meeting age expectations in language and social emotional areas. So moving on to literacy, most of what we have tonight in terms of outcomes to share with you are around literacy. And let me move my slides along. So the first thing I want to talk about is the different types of screening in our FastBridge assessments. So you probably have heard a lot about dyslexia screening and FastBridge assessments that are required by the state. And then also in our Minnesota multi-tiered system of support system, we are also focusing on a universal screening. That was in our goal last year. So I'm going to talk about the difference between those two. With dyslexia screening, you're looking at discrete skills based on specific foundational reading skills that are identified in the READ Act. That includes in grades 1 and 2, early reading specific subtests, and then for grades 2 and 3, it's CBM reading. Those are required by the state. Starting in 24-25, all districts are required to administer those assessments and those specific subtests fall, winter, and spring. So talking about universal screening is about general outcome measures. They measure a combination of reading skills that predict future success and performance on the MCA. For K and 1, that's the early reading composite, so that's a collection of subtests. For grades 2 through 8, we use the A reading test. So starting in 23-24, we did screening for all students, grades K8, fall, winter, and spring. So I'll be sharing those results today. So the FastBridge Universal Screeners fit within our professional learning framework, specifically on the levels of data component of the framework. These are specifically map level data. So as Dana had mentioned, we have many levels of data that we use to track student progress, and so we know how students are growing and how to meet their needs. So FastBridge Screeners are map level data. It's that middle tier that tells us what is happening and leads us into a specific direction. They're one layer of data that is used by the BILTs and the PLCs. And for 24-25, as Dana had shown in one of the examples for the site growth plans, a lot of our buildings have used the FastBridge Universal Screeners as their QComp goal and also their building goal. So early reading composite and A readings. The early reading composite, as I mentioned, measures specific skills that predict successful reading of connected text. They can be used to identify students with characteristics of dyslexia. And the composite is made up of 4 separate subtests. They're administered one-to-one by school staff, and it takes about 8 to 10 minutes to administer each test to each student. A reading measures broad reading skills. It's aligned to Minnesota academic standards, and it predicts student success on the MCA. It's group administered on iPads. It's untimed, but it typically takes an individual student about 20 to 30 minutes to complete the test. So FastBridge Universal Screeners are periodic assessments for all students to identify which students may need additional support. The scores are always used in combination with other data for individual student decision-making. To gather that additional data we call street data, teachers would be using formative assessments, interviews, and observations to identify where to focus their instruction. By doing the universal screeners, we can measure student growth across years and also within the school year. These results are reviewed by our teams 3 times a year, including our teaching and learning leadership team, the building leadership teams, and our PLCs. It informs their goals, their planning, their instruction, and their professional learning. I did an analysis of our WYZETA data this past spring of looking at the MCA scores, and I did find a strong correlation between A reading and MCA reading scores for our students, and that correlation was between 0.75 and 0.85. Oops. So reading at or above grade level. MDE has not defined this yet, so we as districts need to determine this for ourselves. So in WYZETA, we use the FastBridge National Cut Scores for the early reading composite, and we use the MCA aligned cut scores for A reading. Within FastBridge, there are 4 different risk levels for each of the screeners. There are high risk, some risk, low risk, and on target, and that tells us the probability the student has based on that score of meeting grade level targets. Just a note for low risk, I have an asterisk there. Early reading, the composite, the highest range that students can score in is the low risk range. In FastBridge, they guide districts to use low risk as the indicator that students are on track to meet grade level targets, so that's what we're using for our definition of at grade level. In the 24-25 district literacy goal, we are using FastBridge to measure our progress. And so the data that I'm presenting today for the 23-24 school year should be considered a baseline. So, there we go. For early reading composite in grades K and 1, you see that we have 65% of students who met that target of being low risk in the spring of 24. You also see that when you're looking at the left-hand side for students by race ethnicity, there is quite a big gap between Asian students and our students in the group of Black or African American and Hispanic or Latino. It's about a 30-point gap. On the right-hand side of their special populations, I do want to note for students who are eligible for EL services, our EL teachers make the determination for students who have very limited English proficiency on whether or not the test is appropriate for them. So not all of our students take the early reading composite. However, we encourage as many students as it is appropriate for to take the test. So moving on to the next slide. For grades 2 and 5, we do have data for the last 3 years. So I'm going to present this in 2 separate charts. So here you can see we've got 3 years of data from the 21-22 school year in the spring to the 22-23 in the spring, and then 23-24. Overall, we have about 80% of our students in grades 2 through 5 performing in the low risk to on target range in the spring. And then you'll notice we do have achievement gaps between our students in the Asian student group and students in the Black or African American group and the Hispanic Latino group. One thing I do want to note is that for the Black or African American student group, there was an increase from the spring of 22 to spring of 24 in terms of closing the achievement gap. However, it is still a large achievement gap. So moving on to special populations, you'll see again up above that for all students, the percent performing in the on target or low risk range is about 80%. And then we do have a gap for our students in special populations. In grades 6 through 8, I'm sorry, I'm advancing my slides on my laptop and forgetting to do the slides so that everybody can see the advancement. So for grades 6 through 8, we're about 80% meeting that grade level target of low risk or on target. And you can see, again, there are significant achievement gaps for our students by racial group and also by special population. Yeah, that'd be great, thanks. So then moving on, what's really exciting about using universal screeners multiple times a year is that we can measure fall to spring growth. And in the FastBridge materials that we get from them, they do have 4 different growth ranges that we look at to determine whether students are making the growth that we would expect or that we would want for them. So all of their growth ranges are based on national norms. Their ranges are flat growth, modest growth, typical growth, and aggressive growth. And as you probably would suspect, the typical growth is average growth, aggressive growth is above average growth, modest growth is below average growth, and flat growth is well below average or flat or declining. To close our achievement gaps, our goal is for all students who scored in the risk level of high risk or some risk in the fall to make aggressive growth from fall to spring. That's how we know that we can close our achievement gaps, because students who are starting with low scores in the fall, we need them to make more than average growth, or what is called in FastBridge aggressive growth. So looking at our data tables, you can see that for kindergarten and first grade students who started the year with a score in the high risk or some risk range, we had about 30% making aggressive growth. If you look at the data table by student group, you see that there is quite a big gap for some of our groups. For Black or African American students, we only had 20% meet aggressive growth. And then also for students receiving special ed and those eligible for free reduced price meals, about 20% as well. So moving on to grades 2 through 5, again, we have 3 years of data, and you can see overall, about 30% of our students who are starting at summer high risk made aggressive growth from fall to spring. And again, we do see some differences in student growth based on their special population or race ethnicity. And for that was race ethnicity, this is special population. So you do see we do have some disparities in special population compared to overall growth, and it's kind of a mix between the different years and the different population groups. When looking at the results for growth for our 6th through 8th grade students, it is quite a bit lower than K-5, so that's something to take note of. Some places where we really need to improve. We're at about 10% of the students who start at summer high risk are making that aggressive growth. So back to Dana to pull us back around to the goals and purposes of today.
So we know still, as we said, we are trying to cut this down and make it more digestible, and it's still a lot, right? But as we continue to think about that through line and what it is we hope that we're coming away with tonight and in the next 2 presentations. So this isn't something we will get to completely tonight. And I think important to remember how that comes from your work down to our student engagement level, as well as this being with FastBridge and our ability to now do it K-8, which is a change, and 3 times a year. We're really starting to get some very good growth data. And why is those 3 times a year so important is because we can adjust instruction in the moment in that time. We're not waiting for MCA data that we get after the kids are no longer in our classroom. And so just kind of thinking of some key takeaways, or if as a board member, if I'm out and about, what is something I can digest and take away from tonight? And that's that the work at our early learning school continues to align with kindergarten, and our kindergarten starting to also understand their role in that readiness to system. So a change conferences this year was a way to get at ready systems. So changing our language from kindergarten readiness to system readiness is an important shift, because that puts the onus on us as adults to be ready. Around the literacy work that continued, you set the mark that we need to be committed to all students and high achievement for all of our learners, and that gap is not acceptable. We measure growth by screening throughout the year, and as I said, that way we can respond to it much more quickly and adeptly in our instruction. And then to close the gaps, we have to focus on students who are not yet at grade level, and they need to make that aggressive or more than a year's growth in a year's time if we're going to close that gap. So it's exciting to see that in buildings when we report on typical growth, but for our students in the gap, we really need them to make that aggressive growth. And then coming next to you will be that district operational plan that links your work in that strategic roadmap. And you just need to really continue to stress how important your role is in that work, because it sets the tone for where we are headed. And then that DOP is a process that will align that to have those accountability measures for it. That'll be forthcoming. And so again, just to remind you, we get to be back with you on October 26th to do the rest of that World's Best Workforce, and then with Dr. Harity for the achievement and integration. And then for our public, or for any of you, if you have questions about this report, we do have kind of like our own ticket, if you will, and that's asktnl@wayzataschools.org. And then that way you're assured the question gets to somebody who can answer it as well. And then we're here to thank you for the time and your leadership as a board. That's very important as we do our work. And then we're ready to take some questions. And we also have, I want to thank Austin Tollerson, who heads up our literacy work in the district, along with Ann Fehrenbach, are here to join us in case some of the questions are an area where they can. And then Julie Schneider, also critical in this work, could not be with us tonight, but just want to publicly thank them, as well as Dr. Lackner for her amazing work with this. So thank you, and we'll take questions.
All right. Thank you, Dana. Thank you, Dr. Lackner. And thank you, Austin and
Ann.
And Fahrenbach. Sorry. So, Dana, should we wait to ask TNL questions, or can we ask them now?
We're here. You
I'm
can
just
ask.
kidding. Just kidding. Thank you.
I'd rather
Thank you.
answer in person. There's a lot of writing.
Thank you. So any questions, comments? No? Paras?
Yeah. Just so I'm following, right? So when we look at those metrics, because we want to make sure all students are successful, right? Is it fair to say, so let's say if you look at any category, K to 1, which says, 65% for now, there is definitely a variation between each of those categories, right? Whether it is Asian, Black and African American, or when you look at other buckets. But the goal is ultimately to get everybody to 100%. Is that fair? So your roll up should always gear towards 100%. Now we'll see year over year increment, but that's really how we would track the trend and make sure all of our action plans are working and we are seeing that progress and so on. Does that make sense?
Yep, that's correct. In the best of worlds, and when you set the tone of each and every student, and all students, all means all. And so we would be looking for 100%.
Okay, all right.
Correct.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Yeah, there.
Well, first off, thank you so much for all this information. It's very complicated, but also very necessary. I'm really happy to hear it. I just had a general question about kind of the numbers and statistics that you gave us. So, for example, just kind of how they might track and how we might understand the data in comparison to maybe other metrics. So when you said, for example, like, 30% roughly of our, 2 to 5 group achieving like aggressive growth. So do these numbers, do these breakdowns when we go to like, average growth at, and aggressive growth, where would those track over like a typical bell curve? Is that kind of a distribution that we would see, or is it much different than that?
So when they develop the ranges for the growth, that is a bell curve. So flat growth is below average, modest is just below average, typical is average, and then aggressive is above average. So those are based on percentiles and the normal curve. When we're looking at just our students who are starting at some are high risk, we're trying to maximize the percentage of students who are getting that aggressive growth, so above average. So what we're trying to do is basically beat the odds with our students who are starting at the lowest performance level, because we do want to make sure that we're closing our gaps and getting all of our students to be at grade level. So the growth bands are normative, but our goal is to have more of our students at that above average growth.
Excellent, thank you.
So if you have one, Valentina, okay.
Looking at the slides, I have a question from World's Best Workforce 2023-24 goals. My question is, especially when you're putting that all racial and economic achievement gaps between students are closed, statement by what year are you expecting? It looks like, I mean, it is long-term strategic plan, but by what year are you expecting?
So within the World's Best Workforce statute, they don't tell us that a specific end date. That's something that we'll do in our district operational plan for 24-25, that we will have metrics that have a start point and an end point. And that's something that we would develop, whether it's a 2-year goal, a 3-year goal, or a 5-year goal. That would just need to be determined when we have an official operational plan for the 24-25 school year.
Yeah, so those 4 goals are state set goals that they expect all districts to get to, but they don't set a marker because obviously districts are at varying places on that, and some gaps are much larger. They're starting at different places. So in general, from a state level, those are the 4 goals that they want for schools, which will go to 5 goals here for the 24-25 school year.
And following that statement, my question is, I understand they can set up goals in front of schools, but my question is how realistic it is to do a 100%. Because, I mean, we're human beings, and any parent who has 2 children can tell that even everything economically and all is the same household, kids can have completely different outcome. And here we're dealing with, I mean, quite wide range of students. Obviously, I mean, what kind of economics, I mean, from what kind of level they are coming, and what kind of support they're getting from their families.
Absolutely. So when we're setting our goals, we'll be setting what's called a SMART goal. So those goals are strategic, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. So what we'll do is we'll set, this is, we'll start here, and then in 2 years we'll be at a certain point. So we wouldn't go from where we're at right now at 65% all the way to 100 in 1 year. So, but the goal is to ever increasing every year and across years to that 100%. And we know that students come from all different backgrounds, and they have all different experiences throughout their life. But the goal still is for every student to be reading at grade level.
And I think too, the strategic roadmap tells us that, right? So you've set goals that say each and every student shall excel. And we want to asset frame that. So we believe, and we have to have a mindset and a commitment that regardless of a student's background, regardless of race, ethnicity, parents' income level, parents' education level, whatever their experiences are, we believe in education that we can get all students to grade level. And that has to be our mindset and our commitment and the asset framing that we come from. So we do believe, and it's our tagline for each and every student, that they shall excel and reach our grade level standards. And that's the mark we set, and that's the mark we strive for, because we would never want to have a mindset that is deficit frame saying, well, it's okay if 10% of our kids don't make it. I wouldn't want that to be my child we're talking about. And so we have a mindset that says 100% of our students, and that may mean we have to do different things for different students and more time or more resources. That's all good with that goal in mind of each and every student and excellence for all. So.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you both for the presentation. I have a couple of questions. One is regarding the world's best workforce goal of having all students being ready in terms of career and college readiness. How does the world's best workforce, or how does WISET measure that? Because in my mind, the proof of the pudding is in the eating, right? So when you go to college, if you don't drop out and you finish all 4 years, then you have done well, I guess, back in high school. Otherwise, once they go to college, do we track their performance? Do we track how they are doing?
So what we have this year is we're looking at the ACT results. So we measure our students within high school. So in October, we'll be reporting the ACT results. However, we know that that's not just the only thing that students need to do to prepare for career in college. So we're talking about other metrics that we could be using beyond test scores. We also do have access to the SLED systems, the Minnesota SLED system that does track students from high school into college and into career. We don't currently use that in our goals, in our operational plan, or we haven't in the past, but that is data that's available. So that may or may not be something to consider as we look forward to career and college readiness. It's a little tricky because we can only control our high school years with students, but that is something that we could consider to look at that SLEDS data that looks at higher ed and also career attainment.
And the second question is about lifelong learners. I don't know how do you define that? How is the world workforce? Is there a measure that you can?
That's the $1 million question.
That's a very good question. So with other directors in the area, assessment directors and research and evaluation directors, we're all trying to figure that out. So we are having conversations with each other to figure out what are individual metrics that we could use. And so we haven't really landed on anything yet, but that's something that we'll just need to work out as we're trying to interpret the new statute.
Yeah, because that means that, it's not just college. You want to make sure they're learners beyond college as well, right? In their careers, in their work.
Yeah, maybe the state will give us some guidance since they created the goal. They could maybe help us out on how they want us to measure that, and that would be helpful. But I think it's really one of those mindset goals again, and that passion and love for learning that they're really looking for us to instill.
Okay. Thank you very much. If nobody has any other questions, thank you, Dana, and thank you, all of you. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right, the last item on the agenda is school board reports. I'll just give you a background on this first before we proceed. At the beginning of summer, Director Ayers asked me if the school board could recite the Pledge of Allegiance, similar to how it is done in our schools. The board needs to weigh in and decide what it would like to do. But before we do that, my colleagues would benefit from learning the historical perspective behind the pledge and some other information based on research, followed by a very brief discussion. Please note that today's discussion is not a vote either way. It is only for informational purposes. Amy, can you please display the first slide for me? Okay, so since its inception in 1892, the Pledge of Allegiance has seen several modifications until 1954. Francis Bellamy, an ordained minister, created a pledge that would be taken on Columbus Day by millions of school children. And I don't know if I want to go through each and every iteration, but there are minor adjustments that were done all the way through 1954. And to note, his version did not mention the words "under God." The phrase "under God" was added to the pledge in 1954 under President Eisenhower. during the Cold War as a way to distinguish the US from atheistic communist countries. All right, if you want to go to the next slide, Amy. Okay, so now we have the state law governing the Pledge of Allegiance. By state statute 121A.11, it is required that all public and charter school students recite the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America one or more times each week. And we have a policy in place, policy number 531, for precisely that. The statute also recognizes that the students are able to opt out, and we also have that in place in our policy number 531. However, there is no such law mandating the recitation by school boards. So I'm going to spend the next few minutes from whatever research I have done, whatever I have seen, heard, etc., on why there is support versus why there is apprehension. So both sides, okay? Number one, it is a policy for children in school classrooms and should also be recited during board meetings. That is what the supporters are saying. Number two, while the addition of Under God in 1954 has been controversial, supporters argue that Under God reflects the historical values of the nation and is a recognition of the religious heritage of the United States. They believe that the phrase is more ceremonial than religious. Number three, a vast majority of rural school boards surveyed recite the pledge. In suburban school districts, however, school boards, it is split 50-50. And finally, the Plymouth City Council, the MSBA board, the state legislature, and the US Congress also recite the Pledge of Allegiance. Those are from the supportive side. So why is there apprehension? Number one, religious concerns. The phrase Under God was added to the pledge in 1954. This inclusion has been controversial, particularly among those who advocate for a strict separation of church and state. Some people feel that including a reference to God in a pledge recited in public settings is an endorsement of religion. Atheists, agnostics, and followers of non-theistic religions may feel that the pledge alienates them or forces them to make a religious statement. Number two, political implications. The pledge has been used in political contexts to question the patriotism of individuals or groups who refuse to recite it. This politicization can deepen divisions within society and create an environment where dissenting voices are marginalized. And number three, inclusivity. Some school boards reject the Pledge of Allegiance to promote inclusivity and respect for diverse beliefs and backgrounds. They may believe that requiring members from different cultural, religious, or national backgrounds to participate in reciting the pledge could make some feel excluded or uncomfortable. So that is the information I have, and now I'm going to open this to questions, comments from colleagues. Just remember, this is not a vote, so what I said so far has nothing to do with trying to make up your mind one way or the other. So please remember that when you say something. Yes, Sheila.
Just to clarify, we're only talking about the board, the school board saying it. We're not talking about anything about students, correct?
That is correct. That is already in place. The policy is already in place for as far as the schools are concerned. We're talking about that. This is just the board.
And this is in reference to us taking out of the consent agenda like many board meetings ago? I guess I'm confused about the...
Yes, I checked that. Thank you for asking that question. I did check that. It was with reference to the schools, actually. So it was not with reference, because school boards, our board was not doing that anyway at that time. So
Okay.
waiving the Pledge of Allegiance at the board meeting where we are not doing it anyways, was not actually a part of the consent agenda.
Thanks.
Any other comments? So I think we are going to end our work session.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah, well,
Yes, okay. That it is obviously I'm an immigrant And I, at the beginning, I have to admit, it was very interesting as an immigrant to see it. But at the same time, I've seen my kids doing Pledge of Allegiance as scouts. And I was amazed how kids are bringing, I'm an American. At the beginning, I was thinking, did grandma, grandpa train them or what it is? It is coming within them. When they are saying it, they are proud to be an American. Obviously, my kids are raised in an international family, so it is very interesting to see the growth. And then pledge was a way, pledge is to the country, not to president or party. It unifies rather than divides. Pledge to flag, which belongs to all Americans and which represents all Americans. Indivisible, not divided by state or race, color, religion, or anything else. We pledge to support all Americans. If anything, our pledge actually helps us to be unified, to feel proud that we belong to this country. And when we are, as a board, asking our students to recite Pledge of Allegiance, why don't we show an example? Thank you.
All right, if there are no other questions or comments, Paras, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, just to your point, are there any concerns, any observations that we have seen? And again, not saying I'm against it. So I'm immigrant too. Obviously, our primary goal is to focus on students' outcome, right? That's why we are here. So is there any kind of trend observation that we have seen which is impacting that outcome, and hence we need this decision, or this is just a topic and we're going to vote at later date?
That's correct. This is just a discussion, question,
Okay.
clarification session.
Okay.
And I do not know of any research data that shows that there was any change in outcome, one way or the other, by the board pledging allegiance to the flag. Right. So
Yeah. Do we see any issues or concerns within Wayzata School District? Again, whether it is unity, anything along that line? Again, just asking because I know a lot of times each one of us get approached by different parents, community members. So again, just trying to understand, is that what we are hearing from community too?
Okay, that's a good question, but I have not focused on that. I am focusing only on the school board because that was the request. As far as the schools are concerned, I believe we do not have a choice. It's by statute that we are requiring them to have the Pledge of Allegiance with the waiver also incorporated in it. So I am not aware of any of that. So.
All right, thanks.
All right. Okay, if there are no other questions, this completes our work session agenda for this evening. We will now take a 5-minute break, following which we will reconvene for a special meeting of the board. The time is now...
Chair Sahoni, I think we cannot start until 6 p.m. because the next meeting is scheduled at 6 p.m. So it'll be a little bit longer than a 5-minute wait.
Thank you.
Yes.
I did not pay attention to that. So, okay. So we'll meet in about 25 minutes or so. Just make sure you're back by 6 o'clock. Thank you, everyone. The Wayzata Public Schools Board of Education work session for Monday, September 23rd, 2024 is adjourned.